3 p.m. The sky rips open in darkness. The veil between heaven and earth trembles. And Jesus dies. In that exact instant, boom, the entire world changes forever. The dead tear through the stones of their sepulchres and walk out. A colossal empire begins cracking at its foundations. Even humanity's own calendar is forced to bow and reorganize itself around that very moment. The women who were there at the foot of the cross, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, Salome, Joanna, and so many others, weeping, their hearts shattered, had no idea of the spiritual earthquake happening behind the scenes of the universe. They were witnessing the most decisive, most explosive, most transformative moment in all of human history. In this video, you'll discover 7 colossal events that shook not only the narrow streets of Jerusalem, but the entire planet. Events that explain how the death of a simple Jew nailed to a Roman cross as a criminal became the 0 point of civilization, the turning point of everything that came before and everything that would come after. While those women wept, clinging to one another, watching the blood drip and the Master's lifeless body hang there, Jesus' spirit was not idle. He was descending to the lowest parts of the earth, invading the kingdom of death like a conquering king. 1 Peter 3:19 leaves no doubt. He went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison. Ephesians 4:8-9 completes the picture with power. When he ascended on high, he led a host of captives. He descended to the lower parts of the earth. Picture the scene. Close your eyes and imagine. While the women gazed at the lifeless body on the cross, Jesus' spirit was invading Sheol, the realm of the dead. It wasn't a polite visit. It wasn't a calm stroll. It was a divine military invasion, a triumphant assault, a declaration of war that ended in total victory. For centuries, imagine, centuries, the righteous who died were held there. Abraham, the father of faith. Moses, the deliverer. David, the man after God's own heart. Isaiah, Jeremiah, all the prophets, all waiting for the promised redemption. Sheol had 2 clearly defined parts. On one side, Abraham's bosom, a place of rest and hope for the righteous. On the other side, torment for the wicked who rejected God. Jesus didn't descend to stay. He descended to retrieve his own. He went straight to Abraham's bosom and shouted, "The time has come. I am the redemption you've been waiting for." Imagine Abraham lifting his eyes after centuries of waiting and seeing the Messiah arrive. The Messiah he believed in when God promised descendants as numerous as the stars. Moses, who wrote about the prophet who would come, finally sees him face to face. David, who sang in Psalm 16, "You will not abandon my soul to hell, nor let your Holy One see corruption." David watches the prophecy explode into reality right before his eyes. It wasn't a calm meeting. It was a mass liberation, a celestial evacuation. Jesus completely emptied the righteous section of Sheol. He took everyone away. Ephesians 4:8 quotes Psalm 68 with authority. When he ascended on high, he led captivity captive and gave gifts to men. While the women wept, thinking everything had ended in tragedy, Jesus was commanding the greatest rescue in human history, pulling thousands, tens of thousands of righteous souls out of the prison of death. And this perfectly explains why, 3 days later, when the earth shook, violently the rocks split and the tombs opened, so many saints were resurrected and appeared alive. Because Jesus had already broken the doors, already destroyed the locks, already annihilated death's power over the righteous down there. While they wept in desperation, thinking it's all over, Jesus was proving with actions that death does not have the last word, not over him and not over anyone who believes in him. This invasion of hell was the first thunderous sign, the first roar, announcing that death was about to turn the world upside down. Because if Jesus can invade the kingdom of death, defeat its guardians, and come out victorious, then nothing, absolutely nothing, is impossible for him. Not even making crowds of the dead literally walk out of their tombs and stroll through the streets of Jerusalem in broad daylight. The dead walking the streets. a scene no one will ever forget. Matthew 27:52-53 describes something that feels like the script of an epic movie mixed with supernatural horror. And the tombs broke open. The bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs after Jesus' resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared to many. Visualize this. You're in Jerusalem, the air still thick from the crucifixion. Suddenly, the earth roars, stones crack, and ancient tombs burst open on their own. People who died 10, 20, 50 years ago walk out alive, breathing, speaking, hugging loved ones, walking the streets. The women near the cemeteries must have frozen in shock, or fainted, or screamed with emotion mixed with terror. Because hearing about resurrection in the synagogue as a distant doctrine is one thing. Seeing your own grandfather, husband, son, brother, dead for decades, walking toward you with life in their eyes is something completely different. And it wasn't one or two people. The text says many bodies of saints. It was a mass resurrection. Imagine the chaos in the narrow streets. My God, it's my father. He died 15 years ago. Look, it's my wife. She passed in childbirth 8 years ago. Entire families in tears, embraces, nervous laughter, tears of disbelief turning into certainty. They didn't stay hidden on the outskirts. They entered the holy city and appeared to many. Hundreds, probably thousands of people saw this with their own eyes. It wasn't a vision, it wasn't a dream, it wasn't mass hallucination. It was a physical, real, historical event witnessed by crowds. The women of Jerusalem who witnessed it understood instantly. The dead do not come back to life. That's the harshest law of nature which no one breaks. But that day, that law was shattered multiple times. And there's an absolutely crucial detail. All of this happened after Jesus' resurrection. First, he personally defeats death. Then he releases the resurrection of others. His resurrection was the master key that opened every tomb. This event shook Jerusalem to its foundations. The women who saw those resurrections understood. This is no coincidence. It's directly tied to the death of that man on the cross, the man who dared to say he was the Son of God, and who rose again proving he truly was. Even Roman historians of the time recorded strange phenomena in Jerusalem during that period, events they couldn't explain. Now you understand why. When the Son of God dies and rises again, even the dead refuse to stay silent. This was the first physical, visible, tangible impact of Jesus' death on the world, people literally returning from the grave. But this was only the beginning. 1,500 years of religious tradition collapse in 1 second. While the dead walked the streets causing shock and awe, something even more revolutionary was happening at the heart of Judaism, in the temple. The women who served there, who assisted in the rituals, who knew every detail of the sacred place, saw the impossible, the temple veil tearing by itself, from top to bottom. Matthew 27:51. And behold, the curtain of the temple was torn in two, from top to bottom. It wasn't just any thin curtain. The Jewish historian Josephus describes it. It was 4 fingers thick, fabric so resistant that if horses were tied to opposite ends, they couldn't tear it, and it tore by itself from top to bottom, as if invisible hands full of divine authority had ripped it with fury and purpose. The timing was perfect, cinematic, exactly at 3 p.m., the precise moment Jesus breathed his last and proclaimed in a voice of victory, "It is finished." The Jewish women who saw it understood the symbolism instantly, and their hearts must have raced. For centuries, millennia, access to God was blocked by that veil. Only the high priest entered the Holy of Holies once a year, on the Day of Atonement with animal blood. It was the essence of the system, separation between the holy God and sinful man. And suddenly, the veil no longer exists. The way is open, literally open. Any person, you, me, anyone, can now approach God directly. No intermediaries, no complicated rituals, no animal sacrifices, no physical temple as the mandatory center. The temple loses its monopoly. Sacrifices become shadows of what has already been fulfilled. The priestly structure collapses like a house of cards. The entire religious system that controlled the lives of millions crumbled in that second. The women who witnessed the veil tearing knew. They were seeing the end of a millennial era and the birth of something new, radical, eternal, accessible to all. And the impact didn't stay in Jerusalem. Jewish communities scattered throughout the Roman Empire, from Alexandria to Rome, from Asia Minor to Spain, depended on that system. Suddenly, the system was over. The torn veil shouted to the world, Jesus' death replaced all sacrifices. He is the final lamb, the perfect and definitive sacrifice. No more need to kill animals. No more need for a temple. No more need for human priests. Jesus is all of that. The most powerful army in the world begins to kneel. While the religious system collapsed, something equally explosive was happening with the Roman Empire, the military superpower of the time. The Centurion, the Roman officer commanding the execution, a man trained to be cold, who had already crucified dozens, perhaps hundreds of rebels, looks at the cross, sees the earthquake, hears the veil tear, feels the ground shake, and breaks. Matthew 27:54. When the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified and exclaimed, "Truly, this was the Son of God." It wasn't a discreet conversion. It was public, bold, dangerous. He declares in front of the other soldiers, in front of the authorities, in front of the weeping women, this was the Son of God. Mark 15:39 reinforces, it wasn't just him. He and those with him who were guarding Jesus, an entire military unit, were filled with great fear and recognized Jesus as the Son of God. Roman soldiers were the influencers of the era. They traveled across the entire empire, spoke different languages, had maximum authority and credibility. Now, those same soldiers begin spreading, that Jew we crucified, he is the Son of God. The women at Calvary saw the most beautiful divine irony. For 3 years, religious leaders, Pharisees, Sadducees, scribes, rejected Jesus, mocked him, conspired against him. But pagan soldiers, at the darkest moment of the cross, recognize the truth and start proclaiming it. Within just 300 years, the Roman Empire, the same one that killed Jesus, becomes officially Christian. Constantine converts, persecutions end. Christianity emerges from the catacombs and conquers the empire. It all started there, with that centurion kneeling with those women as silent and emotional witnesses. The Roman roads built to expand Rome's power became the veins through which the gospel raced and conquered Rome. The greatest organization in human history is born right there before their eyes. 50 days later at Pentecost, Peter, the same one who denied Jesus 3 times out of fear, climbs onto a platform in Jerusalem and preaches about the criminal who was executed. Result? 3,000 people convert in a single day. Acts 2:41. Those who accepted his message were baptized, and about 3,000 were added to their number that day. The women who saw Jesus die and rise were there. Mary Magdalene, the first to see the risen one, Mary the mother of Jesus, the other Marys. They witnessed the birth of the church with their own eyes, and that church exploded. In a few years it spread throughout the entire Roman Empire. In a few decades it reached Africa, Asia, Europe. In a few centuries it dominated the known world of the time. Today, Christianity is the largest religion on the planet. More than 2.5 billion people, 1/3 of humanity. The greatest organization, the greatest community, the greatest movement human history has ever seen. It all began with the death of that Jew on a Roman cross. How is it possible that 12 frightened disciples hiding in fear transform into evangelists who shake empires? How does a message preached in Aramaic, in an obscure and distant province, become the faith of billions? The answer lies in one single word: resurrection. The women saw Jesus dead, and then they saw him alive. That experience set their hearts on fire forever. If he truly rose again, then he is exactly who he claimed to be: the Son of God, the Savior of the world. And if he is who he claimed to be, it's worth giving your entire life, facing prisons, tortures, death, to spread this news. The first Christians weren't selling a beautiful philosophy. They were witnessing a historical fact. They saw a dead man return to life. That gave them unshakable conviction. Neither lions nor crosses nor bonfires could silence them. The women of Calvary become the first evangelists in history. They tell other women. Those tell their families. Families tell communities. In a few years, there were Christians in every major city of the empire. In a few decades, emperors bow down. It all happened because of that death on a cross and the glorious resurrection that followed. They saw the beginning of the greatest spiritual revolution in history. A revolution without swords, without armies, without imposition. Only hearts conquered, lives transformed, and the world was never the same again. Even time bows before that cross. The impact was so gigantic that all of humanity was forced to reorganize time itself around that death. Before Christ, every civilization had its own calendar. Rome counted from the founding of the city. Greeks used the Olympics. Jews counted from creation. Egyptians and Babylonians had their own systems. But Jesus' death was so overwhelming that in the 6th century, the monk Dionysius Exiguus proposed dividing history into before Christ, BC, and after Christ, AD, and the whole world adopted it. Think of the absurd magnitude of that. Powerful empires, millennial civilizations, proud nations, all abandoned their own temporal markers to adopt a calendar centered on the death and resurrection of a man considered a criminal. Today, when you write 2026, you're declaring out loud, "It's been 2026 years since Jesus died and rose again." When you sign a document, when you see a date in a newspaper, a contract, a passport, you're acknowledging that that Friday at 3 p.m. was the 0 point of modern history. Even Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu countries, atheists, nations that reject Christianity, use dates based on Christ's life. Implicitly, everyone recognizes that event was the most important in human history. Attempts to change this failed miserably. During the French Revolution, they tried a secular calendar. In the Soviet Union, they tried to eliminate Christian references. Nothing worked. The impact of the cross is impossible to erase. Every time someone looks at the calendar, they're remembering that day, that death, that resurrection. Because when the Son of God dies on a cross, even time bows before him. The women who wept at Calvary saw the birth of a new era, an era that lasts to this day, and will last until he returns in glory. Death loses its terror forever, and that changes everything. Throughout all of human history, death was the great enemy, the absolute end, the final terror. Kings built giant pyramids to try to cheat death. Philosophers created desperate theories. Religions promised something after, but no one had absolute certainty. Until that Sunday morning. The women arrive at the tomb carrying spices to anoint the dead body, prepared for the final mourning. But they find the empty tomb. Matthew 28, 5-6. The angel proclaims with a voice of victory, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. He has risen just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay." In that instant, everything changed. Forever. If Jesus rose again, death is not the end. If he defeated death, then others can defeat it too. If a dead man returned to life with a glorious body, then life is stronger than death. The women who saw Jesus alive after the crucifixion become the first witnesses of history's greatest victory. Life crushing death. How did simple fishermen, without formal education, have the courage to face the Roman Empire? How did early Christians sing hymns while being thrown to the lions in the Colosseum? How did martyrs go to the stake smiling? Because they weren't dying. They were passing into eternal life. Death transformed from a monster into a doorway to glory. Paul sums it up with a triumphant shout in 1 Corinthians 15:55. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? Death lost its sting. It can no longer threaten those who believe in Jesus. It became merely a transition, from the temporal to the eternal, from the limited to the infinite, from pain to full joy. That's why Christian hospitals sprang up around the world, because Christians have no fear of caring for the dying. Missionaries went to jungles, deserts, dangerous places, because death is no longer the end. Social justice movements, abolition of slavery, human rights. Many were born because people were willing to die for causes greater than their own lives. All because Jesus proved there is no definitive end. There is only passage from death to life. And it all began that Friday at 3 p.m. when a man died on a cross, and continued that glorious Sunday, when he walked out of the tomb alive forever. The women who witnessed these events saw history's greatest victory, the victory of life over death, of love over hate, of light over darkness. The cross was not the end, it was the beginning of everything. And if you want to dive even deeper, click here on the screen to watch what happened after Moses' death, the 40 days that changed Israel forever, and the dramatic events almost no one talks about regarding the most important transition in biblical history,